Hey friends, I'm coming to you today from an undisclosed but beautiful location. And what we're going to do today is wrap up chapter 7 of Matthew, and by doing that, wrap up the Sermon on the Mount as a whole. Remember, the Sermon on the Mount is a masterpiece of teaching that Jesus gave on a hillside one day to a group of people. This past Sunday in Cornerstone, I likened it to a master class. A master class with several different sessions on a variety of different things. This past week in Cornerstone, we talked about the session on prayer, but it is a master class on how to live best in this world. So we're going to wrap that up today. We're going to look at some of the specific things that happen here at the end of chapter 7, but also what I really want to show you is kind of an overarching theme that really ties the last several sections of Matthew chapter 7 together. So let's take a look at those together. Before we do that, I just want to say that going through the Sermon on the Mount has been overwhelming in so many ways for me this time around, because I believe that it is just a simple masterpiece, one that is inspiring to me but also challenging to me, one that there are elements of that I understand and elements of that I don't get, things that have been unfolded that I've learned, and things that I know that are yet to be unfolded. And I just hope that this won't be the last time that you read the Sermon on the Mount, but hopefully we've all gotten something out of it this time. So when you get midway through chapter 7, you get kind of a turning point, kind of a break. And what Jesus says is, he says, so it's kind of like a therefore, based on everything that I've said so far, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. We know this is the golden rule. Later, Jesus will sum up the scriptures, what we would call the Old Testament. He would just call the scriptures. He'll sum it up by saying it all comes down to two things: loving God and loving people. Here he sums it up even more succinctly. It all comes down to this: do unto others what? As you would have them do unto you. And then he enters into this conclusion of his sermon, where there are several examples that are given, but notice this theme that runs throughout all of them. So I'm just going to show them to you and then see if you can see the theme. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many. There are many people who enter the wide gate, the easy path. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. So there are two gates. There are two ways. And lest we too quickly think, oh, I'm definitely on the narrow path, we remember that there are few who are on that. And I have to remind myself that, yeah, that is certainly something that I'm seeking, is something that I'm striving towards, but I am all too easily pulled back to that wide path also. So there's the first example. And then he says, beware of false prophets who come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Maybe you didn't know that this was from Jesus either, a sheep in wolf's clothing, right here from Jesus' teaching. You'll recognize them by their fruits. So there are bad prophets. By implication, there would also be like good, righteous, true prophets. How do you know the difference? You'll recognize them by the fruit. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes? No. Are figs from thistles? Of course not. So every healthy tree bears what? Healthy trees bear good fruit. Diseased trees bear bad fruit. A healthy tree can't bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. So how do you evaluate if somebody's a true prophet or a false prophet? Look at the fruit that's coming from them. You can take that beyond prophets. How do you judge if a relationship, a friendship is a good, healthy friendship? Is it bearing good fruit in your life, or is it bearing poisonous fruit? How can you tell if an activity that you're participating in is good, if it's right? Does it bear good fruit in your life, or does it bear poison fruit? There are true prophets and false prophets. There are trees that bear good fruit, and there are trees that don't. And then, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So here you see two kinds of people: those that cry out, Lord, Lord, that will give homage to God and to Jesus with words, but not with their actions. The one who does the will of my Father in heaven, this is the one who's in the right place. So you see people who give homage just with their words, and those who actually do with their actions. And I won't read the rest of that, you can read it on your own, but again, you see these two kinds of people. And then finally, this great example, this word picture that Jesus paints that wraps the whole thing up, where he says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man, a wise person, who builds his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on what? The rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them is like a foolish person who builds a house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew it and beat against the house, the same thing, and it fell. And great was its fall. And here you see the wise person and the unwise person. And you see the back half of chapter 7, the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, this masterpiece. What it does in several different ways, was it 3, 4, 5 different ways, it compares and contrasts. There's this way and there's that way. There's healthy trees and there's unhealthy trees. There's those who build on a strong foundation, and there are those who build on the weak foundation. And it goes back to the beginning of what we looked at today, and that is, what path are you on? The skinny path that's hard to find and hard to stay on, or the wide path that everybody else takes? Are we treating people the way that we want to be treated? Or are we treating people the way that we want to treat them? And what it all comes down to for Jesus at the end of this lesson, and what we'll see beginning next week, is how he actually shows us how to live this out with his life. He doesn't just tell us, but he actually lives it out. As he says this, he says, look. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, they're going to be the ones built on a strong foundation. All the people that are sitting there have heard the words. You now, having read this, whether it was the first time or the 100th time, you have heard these words. The key is not hearing them. The one who builds the house on the rock is the one who hears them and who does them. I mean, we can hyper-spiritualize this, and there's certainly spiritual ramifications for all this, but it is also intensely practical. Jesus is saying, I am teaching you the best way to live, friends. The best way to live in this world. And if you root your life in this, you build your life in this way, you follow in the way that I am leading, you will have a solid foundation. But if you go the way that everybody else is, be warned. When the rains come and the wind begins to beat around the house, when the storm comes into your life, you may find that your foundation isn't as solid as you thought that it was. Remember that the way that the Sermon on the Mount started is by Jesus saying to a group of people, you too. It's that you also are welcomed in. Everybody is welcomed in, but he doesn't welcome people in to leave them where they are. He welcomes people in to move them from where they are to where he knows they can be. Come and build your life. One of the core truths that I just believe is that Jesus is not just something to build into your life, but Jesus is something to build your life around. As we transition from this master class on how to do life well in this world, we begin to see not just what Jesus taught, but how Jesus himself lived. We are just at the very beginning of this book of Matthew, and what we're going to continue to see is how he doesn't just believe these things with his mind, but he lives them with his actions. And my prayer is that we will be people who don't just believe these things with our minds, but who live them with our actions, who choose the narrow path of treating others the way that we want to be treated, who choose the narrow path building our lives around Jesus, not building him into our lives. Who choose the narrow path of rooting our lives in the solid foundation that he has opened up for us. So I hope that the Sermon on the Mount has been helpful to you. I know that it has been to me. God bless you, friends. Keep on reading. And we're going to get back into the narrative this week and discover more about who Jesus is, not just by what he teaches, but by how he lives. God bless you, friends. And isn't that the way that we want to live our lives? That we want people to discover who we are, not just by what we say, but by how we live. That's where we're going with Jesus next week. God bless you, friends. Chapter 8 next week. I'll see you then.